Okay, we're recording and welcome everybody to North Star Bad Chart Show, and we've got Mike Sloman with us today. Patrick Karim and myself, Kevin Wadsworth, and Mike Sloman. Hi, Mike.
Hi, everyone.
Mike, you might recognise from Twitter with his spider charts and all the analysis that he's been doing, which has been intriguing.
Branded spider charts.
Absolutely intriguing me and Patrick, and Mike, of course, was one of our students on our masterclass courses. So, welcome, Mike.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to be here as well. No, really glad to kind of share some thoughts with you. Really, I've been working quite a few things lately as well. So, I mean, it's been a crazy couple of days really with the metals taking off and uranium as well. So it's nice to see some of the charts coming good. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's something we've all been waiting for a while, and it looks like some of the intermediate cycle lows have been put in place, and we've got some better times to look forward to in the next few weeks. Hope so. Anyway, so yeah, go for it, Mike. Do you want to give us a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what I thought I could do is if I could give you a brief sort of background to sort of where the spider charts came from, if you like, just a couple of minutes, and then just talk through the evolution. So I can talk through the spider charts themselves, and then move on to sort of the spider symmetry, because that's kind of when it was a bit of a game changer for me, when a lot of things started making sense, is when you actually started looking at some of the patterns that were developing in them. And then I was going to talk a bit about the spider Gann charts. So then when you bring sort of, because what I was sort of finding is that these things are really working, but I wanted in a way some proof or something that was kind of saying, you know, evidence why. So I started looking at things like Fibonacci and Gann, and I found a few things that kind of linked to them and were working. So I'll kind of talk through that. And then at the end, I've got an exclusive, but I've started doing some Fibonacci spider charts, particularly on the markets really, so SPX and NDX particularly. That yeah, I mean, when I started doing them a couple of days ago, it was a bit like Morpheus sitting me down and saying, right, you think you know charts, but do you want to take the red pill or the blue pill? And enter the matrix. And I kind of took the red pill, and my mind's been a little bit blown since. So I'll share them with you guys and see what you think at the end of it.
Welcome to the world of technical charting, Patrick. Well, Patrick and I are quite often sending charts to each other saying, wow, have you seen this? And the implications of this chart, and especially when you start bringing Fibonacci into things, your mind just suddenly, you know, you kind of realize how all of these different techniques kind of are connected and linked together, and nothing is there in isolation. It all feeds into each other.
Well, with this one particularly, I drew it and I put some stuff on there. Then I just looked at where the date centered to, and I won't tell you what it is, but it was like, you've got to be kidding me. But yeah, we'll come on to that in a bit.
Right, okay, I'm starting to get an inkling where you might be going with this, but
yeah, okay. but anyway, can you see my screen there?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so basically where this all started from, I mean, this is a Bitcoin chart, and this was a tweet that I kind of made back in sort of like early April. And I had this idea back at the time, you know, that Bitcoin was moving in this channel, and, you know, all these sort of energy points were moving towards this date that I had at the time, which was like around week commencing the 19th of April. So me and my naivety thought, well, great, you know, Bitcoin's going to go up to this point, and, you know, we're going to go up to $100,000, and maybe that's the point that it breaks through. And so I was kind of looking at this, and what obviously, as people know, happened is Bitcoin didn't go up to $100,000 and kind of like leveled off and went here. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it, apart from, well, I made a mistake and that wasn't kind of right, really. So that sort of then goes to a chart I was doing here with silver. So this is silver, and this goes back to sort of like the 9th of August. And I was seeing basically all these energy points were coming together for silver. And I was thinking at the time, you know, well, look, this is a false breakout around the apex move, 9th of August, happy days, you know, it's going to move off here. And what actually turned out was, you know, 9th of August, you know, we know now it looks like it's the ICL for gold, and was a severe low for silver. So in effect, you know, two sort of, you know, in a way, mistakes that I made or things that I thought were going to be different ended up being massive learnings for me, because I started doing some charts and having some conversations offline with Dow Gold equals 1 a few months ago. And I suddenly realized, you know, well, what if these energy points, you know, they're not pointing to, you know, a price or pointing to where something's going, but what if things are revolving around them, or they're moving up to them and then kind of, you know, acting a bit like gravity and sort of revolving around them. And I went back to the Bitcoin chart saying, wouldn't it be mad if the chart was actually pointing to the peak date of Bitcoin? And lo and behold, it was. So, you know, that energy point that was pointing out there ended up being, you know, it says the 12th of April there. If you get a day chart, that's the 14th. but it ended up being the date that Bitcoin, hit its highest peak. So way back here, well, not way back, but a few weeks before, if you'd known what the chart was showing, you could have identified that that was the peak date in Bitcoin. And what happened thereafter was it kind of, rolled over. And what happens next is a bit up for debate, which I'll chat about a bit later on. But it kind of made me think, well, look, there's something here going on. And the other thing that I was thinking at the time is, I was drawing a lot of arcs. I mean, I'm a massive fan of arcs, as you guys are, and learned most of it from you, Kevin, and obviously Sir Patrick. But I was kind of thinking at the time, what I didn't like about arcs was the way that, often when they break down, and arcs. Let me find an arc. Let's go for silver here. When you find an arc, it often breaks down. There's several points which I'll come on to later on, but the most common place is kind of down here. It's kind of in the bottom right-hand corner where it breaks down, if it does. And I hate the fact that you kept sort of dragging arcs over to the right or doing things like that. And I thought, just from a mathematical point of view, if an arc actually exists and is relevant, it's a geometric shape. It's something that things revolve around. It's something where there's a central point. So, there's got to be a way that you can work this out. And this, combined with the energy points and the Bitcoin thing, just made me think, well, look, let me give it a go. Let me try a few things and see if I can find a central point where things revolve around. So kind of the first one I drew was this, was uranium. So, I'm a big uranium investor and a huge fan, but the uranium art was never really clear. It didn't have that many touch points on it. And I always thought that things were kind of moving in a direction here. So I kind of drew this, and back in the day, it had we call them ladybirds, but I think they're ladybugs in America. But I couldn't find a symbol on TradingView, so I was using that. But I've changed it obviously to spiders now. But I couldn't. I sort of started doing these rotations around it, but I was just guessing at this central point here. And what I didn't have was kind of like a methodology as to where the spider should sit. I could just see these kind of converging points. So what I then did was I then looked at a few different options, and this is actually UX2. But you can see here that, the obvious two places I thought to put the spider are either at the top. So, is it just, going down from the center of the arc, or is it kind of the main sort of pivot line? So if you were drawing, a bull flag, if it was another sort of chart, you'd have your other line down here, wouldn't you? Can you guys hear me all right, by the way?
And yeah, and this is fascinating, because I'm thinking in my mind, this is all tying in with my work on tilted arcs and the fact that you have a support zone rather than a support line at the bottom, and the outer arc always has to be taken into account, and that's determined by the spike low on the left hand side. So you have almost another way of thinking of it is an optimistic arc and a pessimistic arc, which is tying in with your more, I have to say, more detailed and analysed methodology here. So yeah, sorry, carry on. It's
great
stuff.
So what I found, and I tried quite a lot of methods, is the best place for the spider to sit is on the pivot line. But the key is you've got to find the centre of the arc. So if you and it's easy to get that wrong, and often you can find that your own confirmation bias can actually lead to something that is not actually the case. So you have to do quite a bit of work to find that out. So here in uranium, you've got a perfect example here of, you've got these different layers of the arc, and they work well because you've got the center here. And yeah, I'll touch on it later, but if you actually draw a bull flag here, you'd find that actually the layers of an arc are already written. You'll see them in the pole of the flag as you go up, and they end up being exactly what plays out in there. So you can identify the layers from the side of a pole on a bull flag. But anyway, so that was uranium. So if you go to silver, you can see here, like I was saying here, you can almost see where the lines are going to be by what goes on the pole, leading on the flagpole. But you can see here, the obvious arc is kind of this, but you wouldn't draw it normally because you've got bits coming out, and you wouldn't draw the second arc because you've only got stuff in the left-hand hemisphere, and then there's nothing really in the right-hand hemisphere. So what you've got is you've got price moving around here, but for whatever reason, so in this case it was the March 2020 low, silver got pulled out, and you can see there what happened. Have I got any others? Yeah, so a classic one is what's been going on the last couple of days. So this is one of the posts that I've been doing on Twitter right now. So this is silver live. Let me go into this. So I don't like drawing them on too short time scales, because like in anything really in technical analysis, it's more likely to go wrong on short time scales than on long time scales. But this is silver over the past sort of 24 hours really. So what happened is it kind of ended in here, and it's back testing the bottom of this apex of this channel that's been sort of moving in, and it's had this inverse head and shoulders that's been going on. But what happened is, it's moved around here, and normally when you see spikes out here, you'd think, well, is the arc correct? But yeah, the arc's absolutely fine. But what these spikes were telling you is that actually silver's going to go here when it does its little handle here, touch the edge of the arc, and then bounce out right around the apex, back test it. And so the next move now, I'm predicting is going to be up from here. But it's followed the channel that I put in. I did this channel a few days ago, pretty well considering. So you can see here how the spider charts really help you kind of understand how arcs move. Let's have a look at this. Oh yeah, there was one more silver one I wanted to show you. So this is, I think, is actually my most liked chart I've ever put on Twitter, and it's actually a really old one. I did this when I first started doing spider charts, but this is like a 20-year silver chart. But the other way that spider charts can work, and this will come onto with the stuff I want to talk to at the end, is you can look at a peak of where price action's heading, and silver is one of the few things that really actually has gone parabolic and meets the peak of something here. We saw Bitcoin and how it kind of leveled off. Well, silver went right to the tip here, and you can see these perfect sort of arcs that it made, sort of going up and then going down. And you can see here that this black arc here, which can identify on the flagpole originally down here, it touched in March 2020, and then we've literally just touched it here, and you can see these two lines here which silver's been moving into, which when you actually look later on a Fibonacci chart, that isn't the Fibonacci fan, shows exactly that as a Fibonacci section. So you can see how silver's had a couple of false breakouts on that. I think the Fibonacci one is about there, and you can see the tip there of it there and there, and you can see how silver's moved perfectly within this range. And so, obviously you think the next move is out of there, but you can see how it's moved and respected this sort of symmetry and this arc over this period of time. So, platinum. So yeah, here's another good example, and this is the last one before I move on because I want to touch on the other stuff. So this is the platinum back test that's been going on. So with platinum, you've got, how far does this chart go back? It's a good sort of like, over 10 years. But you've got this situation here where platinum has kind of broken out and trying to back test. And what happened here is there was a false back test. So you've got this line here, which platinum came down and it hit. And so the spider chart was sort of saying, this is it, because with spider charts, the way that you find out the center, it's normally either a really long wick, a really short wick, a double bottom, a V shape, or sometimes just some strange symmetry. So you might get like an S shape like this, an inverse where it goes like that and then like that on the other side, but you're kind of looking for it. So when platinum hit there, I was kind of thinking, well, this could be the bottom, because you've got a perfect sort of chart playing out. But what it really wanted to do was back test the monthly pivot line, or the monthly line that goes right back to the peak, over 10 years ago. And so it did exactly that. So it bounced off that and went down. But what it hasn't done is disrespect the spider chart. It's gone out here on a false breakdown, back tested where it really wanted to go, stayed within the channels, moved out and back tested the pivot line, which is actually the weekly intermediate cycle line there. So and then it's come out and it's broken out there. So you can see how the spider charts kind of help you if say, well, actually, it might not be this, it could be something else, and it still kind of respects what it is that you're looking at. I don't know if that makes sense. I think I've got any questions.
From my point of view, I'm always looking to, when I present an arc, I'm always looking to challenge my bias. So an arc is, tempting you to think when it hits the edge of the arc, right? This is the confirmation, and price is now going to move up. But there's often, I should say, ways of manipulating that arc whilst it maintains its integrity and maintains its target price that affects the sort of time that it's going to take to reach that target. And it's a little bit like here where your price is finding outer bands of the arcs. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I think five sort of concentric arcs there in that bullish arc moving upwards. And I've kind of spotted this kind of thing.
Look at these are touching perfectly when it comes to back test the arc and back test the arc, and so you're going to hit some resistance when it hits this one probably, but I think it will probably break through this. But it's a question then whether platinum, as it goes back up, is it going to start following the original arc back up, or is it now going to move up and down within this one? I've got some views later on with the sort of the Gann charts and stuff like that, but
have a few thoughts, Mike, there as I watch this. You're kind of making us feel like old school dinosaurs, because the way I'm grasping this is the way Kevin does the arc, or the way I learned off Kevin how to do the arcs. It seems super conventional when I see that. What I see right now is there's arcs, but it's not you're using the arcs more as like magnet channels. So once it's respecting an arc, but it doesn't have to be on the left side to the right side. Once it's like respecting that angle of the arc, then it's kind of guiding the price action. But I think the big difference is the way you use those energy lines to find that energy point, and that is something completely different. That and
just here, if you use the Gann one and you go into it, you can see here. I mean, this is gold, and you've got gold actually sort of following, a channel here, between two arcs. And if you were to draw the spider version of it, there'd be several more arcs in there that are doing it. And you can see here with gold. I mean, I'm jumping around. I was going to show this later, but you've got this perfect, 40-degree angle, if you do it this way, of this line coming in here that it's respecting. It hits the chart, and then it's look at this intersection here. 1, 2, 3. It's hitting it perfectly on this. If you go to the symmetry one, where you're actually putting some symmetry stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if this happens. So the line goes through, because this $3,500 is meaning something, because the Gann only fits if you draw the first chart here. But the second you do that, it's like, if it's following the purple line, will it actually complete this arc? My view is that it will probably go into sort of a handle like this and sort of follow up.
So that entry, that super important pivot line that gives you the probable place where the center of your arc of the Gann's going to be. You don't know the amplitude, right, on the right hand side. So eventually you'll on that line you'll get the center of your next arc. But until the price action starts reacting within that smaller arc, then you're not quite sure where it is. But you could use other TA, right, other support resistance levels to try to maybe figure out. Yeah,
exactly that. And I find particularly with the spider charts where you find the changes and stuff, particularly over time. RSI particularly is a really good indicator. I use the stock RSI as well, and MACD, etc. But I find the RSI often fits.
I agree with that. The stock RSI I find really useful. And sometimes the triple exponential, the tricks, but of all of them, stock RSI, if you had to probably just use one on all time frames and you only had access to one, that's probably the most useful.
But this one here, so this is when I start using the symmetry, because I think it was, I'd have to go back to some of the old spider ones, but this was my original sort of gold chart, and I saw gold having sort of 3 arcs coming here. And you've got these 2 parallel sort of channels that are happening, which we're right on at the moment. And so this central bit that goes on in the middle. And if you draw the spider chart version of it here, you find that, it's got this line and then it starts breaking out. But when it starts breaking out a bit too far, I kind of get a bit nervous. And even though this kind of married up, it started getting to the point where, well, really, is this what's happening? And then I know that Kevin, you posted, and Simon on Twitter, the guy with the scuba gear, pointed out as well, that there's this arc that's in play, and I'd kind of seen it before, but when you start doing the symmetry on this one, it fits even better, and you kind of get to the point here where, where the symmetry came from is I was trying to explain to people on Twitter about you've got to find the central point, because once you've found the central point of an arc, and once you've got the pivot line correct, and where the spider sits, the rest just comes together really easily. But to explain kind of where that central bit is, and to kind of, stop confirmation bias, I started doing sort of measurements out from it. And it was only when I started doing the measurements out, I started noticing, oh my God, this is happening on that side, and that's happening on that side, and the same on that side. So it's a classic one here. I mean, look at platinum.
So Kevin, how do we find the center of the arc? Not like that though. It's more by other type of TA, right? I've never seen it this way, to try to find the center of the arc.
Yeah, the center is key. Once you've got it, it makes a huge difference. I mean, look at platinum here. I mean, the center is obvious. You've got a center that comes down. You've got 207 bars that way, and you've got a dip. That's that 204 bars that way. You've got the March low.
I think what I would say is that whilst you're on the left-hand side of the arc, finding the center is a very difficult game to play, and it's not really until you get some touches on the right hand side that start to give you some supporting evidence that the center is behind you rather than ahead of you. The only thing I'm thinking here is I know some of our, I'll call them colleagues on Twitter and in the world of technical analysis are looking at a very bad year next year for precious metals, and I'm just thinking in my mind.
See, I don't see that at all.
No, well, I think I tend to agree with you, but it's just going through my mind, and I always like to keep those bearish scenarios alive in my mind. That is it necessary to draw lower outer arcs to take into account what may be happening if
so I've got I don't know if it was on this one. I've got a version of gold. I haven't got it here, but I had a version of gold that you can just follow this if you put the parallel line in down here. So you go down like that, for example, there's actually a fractal that's kind of repeating here. If you can see that a bit with the inverse head and shoulders, and if you time it out, the fractal actually ends exactly on where the symmetry is here. So instead of going up like that, gold could do that. And to be fair, exactly where that point hits there is exactly on the 50 level or 15 whatever. So there are sort of bearish ways you can look at it. But
and I think the key point is when you do all of this analysis, however, whichever techniques people use, it's you need to identify the point at which your analysis, your roadmap, goes off track. It's like if you're orienteering using a map and compass, and you take a wrong path, you want to know as quickly as possible that you're on the wrong path. You don't want to find out 5 miles down the road, because you've got to walk back up the hill to get back to where you went wrong.
Yeah, so this is where the Gann stuff kicked in, because what I wanted to do is I was seeing all this symmetry, but I wanted to find a tool that was kind of saying, well, how's this symmetry working? So I tried some Fibonacci stuff, and although it works, I mean, you could put in, for example, a Fibonacci time zone here, and it's the same as kind of the gold one, as the Gann one, really, because so it kind of like fits there and there. But you can see from this, and this is when I did this one, this was kind of another eureka moment, because I started at exactly the point that you think it begins there when silver comes into it, and where it ends is around the apex with a perfect middle here. But the bit that I didn't realize till afterwards was when you look at the retracement levels. So when you look at this, I mean, 0.25, I mean, you draw a line there anyway if you were doing it yourself, 0.38, 0.5, 0.61, 0.75. So these things here, it sort of really made me think, that there's some real synergy here with what's happening with the Gann stuff. And if you go to the bigger chart here that we're saying, the Gann stuff is kind of implying, I've got on this one, here we go. If silver kind of follows this route round and follows the Gann chart round, the logical end, if you're doing some symmetry, is up here. But if you've got a measured move that you can see is playing out in silver, you're talking about a potential here of about 49.50 around the end of March. And around the end of March is exactly where the gold cup, if you look at it, if you take the Gann, is due to end. So there's some real key things here that if gold carries on playing out here, that is looking like an end of March happening at the same time as silver does. So I've got this view here that those two things are sort of aligning. So if these things follow out, I'm expecting that, obviously there's bearish views as well, and silver and gold could break down, that end of March is a time zone. I'm going to jump a bit here because I want to show you something, but where is it? It's on just the symmetry charts. But the other thing that I've been thinking where this all ties in is with DXY. So if you look at the dollar or the DXY index, you can see here if you take a 35-year dollar chart and you do some symmetry analysis, and it's pretty obvious anyway because you've got that point there. The center of this chart is sort of around, ironically, it actually falls on the 4th of July if you look at it on the daily chart. So I think I posted something on Twitter that gold may have left we may have left the gold standard, but gold stays patriotic to the United States regardless. It's the center of gold's universe at the moment. It's the 4th of July. But if you look at this here, so back here, gold did this big sort of rise up and created this sort of triangle here and a fall down. And if you follow the arc round, the most common place for an arc to break down is in this bottom left-hand side. And the most common reason for it is it wants to back test, and it normally wants to back test the pivot line. If it's not the pivot line, it's a lower support or resistance line further down. But if you look, it touched this at exactly minus 858 bars. And ironically, at 859, 858 the other side, it touched it again, mirror of that. And what I think it wanted to do is there's a logical cup here that would have happened, and gold would have completed it here. But for whatever reason, it's been pulled down to back test here, and it's moving down, and it wants to complete this triangle. It wants to get to the bottom of this, which ironically is, a bear flag and a measure move down, which would hit it around sort of, when you actually work the exact symmetry, it works out about sort of sometime between the end of May and kind of July time, and we're hit around 80 odd as a level. So I've got this view that there's this possibility that plays out. If you look on some general sort of dollar charts as well, you can see that line play out. So if I was just to get rid of all of this a sec,
one thing to remember as well, of course, is that gold peaks long after the US dollar cycle bottoms. So the precious metals would continue after the US dollar cycle.
Exactly. So I mean, you can draw, this kind of like rising channel here, and you can draw the fact that, if you go in this closer, you can see that it's actually gone here, moved down, back tested it, and a measure move would be exactly where we're just looking on that triangle. It'd be getting it down to here, so around that kind of 80 level. So I've got this view that, the dollar probably will bottom sometime around then, and this ties into what I'll show you at the end, some of these actual charts for the main markets. But it's pretty interesting stuff. Gold silver ratio, I'll go to this one. So if you look at this at the moment, you've got this channel that you can date back to here, and it's doing something similar to DXY, in that it's broken the bottom of that channel and come up and back tested it. And if you take the Gann spider version of it, so you can work out where the center is. You've got these two lines that are parallel going down here. You've got so look here, you've got the Gann sort of like following round. But when you zoom in on it here, just when the actions happened the last couple of days, and I drew this chart quite a bit before that, you can see how it's broken out of there, back tested, and the gold silver ratio, in my view, is actually just broken out at the bottom of this Gann chart. And so you've got in effect the back test of breaking out already, which kind of happened, back here, and now we're moving down. And so if you looked at sort of a reverse symmetry move, it would make sense. Maybe we're looking at something like this for the gold silver ratio. Don't know if you've got any questions around that one, but
just one on the DXY, whether you'd done any analysis using the non-log scale as opposed to the log scale. I've done dollar analysis both on the log and the non-log chart, because it arguably it can be applicable to do both, looking at the numbers of the scale on the right hand side.
Yeah, so this is your doomed one. So you can see here, when you take the Gann view of it and you actually find the center, and instead of doing my own arc, you do a Gann arc, you can see here the center and the symmetry points here, the top here and the bottom here, and then you've got your arc that goes down there. But again, it's pointing here. I mean, 13th of June ish, when you're sort of getting down to that level, if it goes down there and follows a similar pattern. But in this chart, it's already broken out. I mean, the arc's been clear already.
Mike, there's like a little game I like to play to know, to remove some of this, like hindsight is 2020. Can you move over your screen and hide everything to the right side of the spider? So let's make believe we're back in July of 2001. So just move everything and hide it. I don't want to see everything. Yes. So let's try to guess. You see, and that's the magic, Kevin. I believe it's the energy points. The faster you could start spotting those pivot lines, right? I don't know how many you need, Mike, to confirm the Spidey, but when you have like 5 or 6, are you starting to say, okay, man, I'm getting close? Because it doesn't always touch it, right? Like you said, sometimes it's time and price. But I don't know what's the ratio. Is it 50% of the time it's just time? But
In what context? Sorry, in.
So I'm just trying to wonder, like this is added value, being able to spot the center ahead of time.
It'd be difficult at this point, because what you would do at this point is you'd probably draw an arc like that, wouldn't you? And then you'd probably try and find a center, which would be sort of here. So what you'd be trying to work out then is where would it be going? So you're probably trying to identify the point at which it broke, and then it would go down. Because what this has done is you've got an arc there and an arc there, having almost a double, but that's within a bigger arc that's going on here, which actually has failed and is kind of breaking down, really.
Or maybe that trend line break from 94 to 2001, when it breaks down, then you know that you've probably hit a point. Yeah, just like that whole line there from 2002, when you draw, yeah, if you draw it down to 2000 to 94, maybe that gives you a clue that you've turned the corner.
One thing I've noticed is that when you get a very rapid price decline, like you did in the DXY there in the 1980s, you get that very rapid drop off, and that very often indicates that your arc is going to be tilted downwards, because if you try and fit an arc to that's got horizontal top on it, it just doesn't fit. The price is dropping away too sharply. So having a tilted arc when you've got those very rapid price drop offs is a little bit of a clue. But as you say, at that point, during that first sort of cycle of the US dollar coming up to the 1980s, you wouldn't have had the history and the hindsight to know what you know now, which is that you've got that declining support and resistance line.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's one here. I mean, this is one of the ones that first got me into it as well, was when XRP, got here, the second announcement, and it broke out of its arc. But when you put it into a Gann arc here, or a spider Gann arc, you can see that actually the touch points here kind of actually follow through, and you can see now we're sort of touching the same part of the arc there. And you can see here the symmetry as well. You've got, this move down here is exactly the same place as the move on the other side. You've got this here is the same place as that there. You've got mirroring points where it touches this internal arc here. So you can see something very clearly, and all these sort of stack up as the same distances. If you start picking up where the center's gone, like Patch was saying, the other side of it, you can make quite good guesses as to the type of action that it's going to make, really.
And that's the edge as a chart trader there. Yeah. You want to be able to spot, like, Ripple was going bankrupt there at that lower touch on the right there. I forget which one, but it was. It
was being delisted, and everybody was crying out it was going to go to zero. But at that point, half of the arc was already in place, and it really sort of spoke strongly to the fact that Ripple was very unlikely to go to zero. Of course, now with hindsight, we know.
You can even see the measure here. So, I mean, the reason why I've stopped it here as well, if you look at the Gann chart there, if you go to the monthly on XRP rather than the weekly, you can see that it actually completed its arc in April.
It did, so
it did, and then you go into a cup here. So
and that leads to a question that a lot of people come out with, which is what happens when the arc's complete. And my answer to that is always, well, that depends on where you are in the cycle that is affecting the rest of the sector. So in the case of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin is the leader, a bit like, you need to look at GDX and HUI for the miners, and you need to work out what the length of the large cycles are, and therefore whether the likelihood is that you're going to continue up or down or sideways. There's no one rule. When you complete an arc, you can go up, you can go down, you can go sideways. There are other factors that come into play at that point.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin's a good example. I mean, this was something that I drew on Bitcoin recently, where if you actually take the Gann arcs on it, the spider Gann arcs, if you take the low here, March 2020 low, as the center of this arc, you'll notice that Bitcoin has moved perfectly round and then has formed this cup here. What I would say though, and I know that there's a lot of bullish sentiment about Bitcoin at the moment, and I'm pro Bitcoin. I'm not one of these people that are anti anything, really. I mean, I've had a lot of investments in Bitcoin in the past, and it'd be great to see both it and gold do extremely well. But I'm a bit cautious at the moment, just because this one here came up, and then the handle, and it actually broke here and went round, and came up, and then you got the handle here. But if it doesn't break out here, it's actually more bullish than people realise, because if you look at this, I did some analysis and worked out. And it's right on the line now about whether it goes through or not at the moment. I did some kind of ratio analysis of, you know, the red arcs and cups, the blue ones, and then to the green ones. And if it doesn't do that, and this is what I find really interesting with Bitcoin at the moment, is everyone's bullish at the moment. And if you look back this last year, the times that people have been bullish about, you know, gold and silver, we've all kind of learned the hard way that actually they you know, silver squeeze in January and things like that, it never happened. You need sentiment to be low, and it's quite the opposite in the crypto sector at the moment. I think the sentiment is really, really high. And what you almost need is some bad sentiment. But look here what would happen. So if this did fail and this went round here, when you look at the ratios, the time it would break out again is kind of like May 22, which could be the time, for example, when, you know, let's say gold and silver reach the peak of their sort of, you know, moves at the moment, which I think could be around sort of the end of March. If Bitcoin then broke out here, what would happen? I mean, it would come out about 53,000 and it would have gone down again to about, let's say, 30. Everyone's going to think, well, another double top, or Bitcoin now just moves sideways, or the sentiments are either going to be at best positive, you know, could be negative, sorry. And so, but what's going to happen if it breaks through there? You're only going to have the diehards left, and you're talking about a move from, you know, 50,000 in May to like 200,000 in July. So you got a 2-month move next year of, you know, of extreme amounts. So, you know, is that an option? We'll find out over the next couple of weeks, but I think it's worth keeping on the table. But if this does happen, it's extremely bullish for next year. But just a thought. I don't know if anyone's got any questions on that.
Looking at the small cup on there as well, you know, if it does break out now, I wonder what price that projects to as well. I mean, the triple arc sort of scenario that I've got does sort of allow for prices up to, you know, anywhere between 200 and 300,000, but that seems a bit unrealistic in the next sort of couple of months, really. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see just what happens, you know, as the old highs are challenged, just exactly how rapidly this thing takes off if it does get to that stage.
I'm conscious we've only got 15 minutes. I do want to just touch on, before I go on to the other stuff, with silver, because I know it's a thing that most of the people following me will kind of want to hear about, really. And this is the sort of chart that I've been posting a lot of lately, and, you know, and if you look at this, you can see here what's happened. You've got this sort of perfect, when you look at the Gann lines here, where it's, you know, you've got the 0.25, you've got the center, you've got the, well, 0.618 and 0.75 that go up. But if this follows through, and it is looking at, you know, an end around sort of November time, and if you follow the bigger arc around, or the Gann one, that would then lead to that 50 in sort of March time, which coincides with when gold would complete its current sort of like cup, if we think it's going to follow through. But it was really interesting here. So for a while ago, you could predict if this happens, and I've had this one, where is it gone? It's important I show this one probably first. Yeah, this one, because this is one of the first ones that I posted. Showing the spider symmetry version of the same chart. And so you've got these kind of like, you know, 3 arcs that silver's moved in, and they all interconnect on the spider stuff. And you've got these 3 key points where silver is kind of, I think the arcs moved out slightly on this for some reason. It's probably come out of log. Yeah, there you go. So before we hit this blue one, I'd posted this and I thought, you know, we're due to hit something around here, and lo and behold, we did, which then kind of reaffirmed, because this was first drawn kind of around this sort of time. And so it predicted what was going to happen here just by doing some symmetry. But it is kind of showing that, you know, if something's going to happen in line with the purple one here, you could expect a drawback. And if you do the symmetry side of it, that drawback actually falls exactly on the 3rd of November, which is when the next FOMC announcement is. And this head and shoulders, inverse head and shoulders, played out perfectly. And I thought it was going to go around the apex here and around an apex here. And so far it's playing out. So we'll have to see how it goes the next few days, but fingers crossed it's moving in the right direction. But this is where the confirmation bias is kind of important to sort of kind of think about, because I know Patrick, because there is another arc that you would think that, look, it's gone down to here. So, you know, is silver actually doing this? You know, is that going to be the bottom? Is that the symmetrical point? Because it fits there and it fits there perfectly. And it does fit in well with the rest of it. But what put me off that was the fact that the bigger outer circle then didn't work. The touch point here wouldn't be symmetrical. and it wouldn't fit with the Gann chart either, because the Gann shows the middle to be here, and if the middle's there, the end needs to be here. And also, just from my own perspective, when silver moves, you know, it moves. Yeah. And if the arc's like this, it's going to be pretty predictable, isn't it? It's going to do exactly the same as it does on the other side. And when silver makes moves, you know, it's not generally sort of, you know, in a gradual way. The big moves come like this. So my inclination here again is that it's going to end up doing something similar to this.
Well, Mike, I've noticed silver, like I've had the bigger arcs, and that on the right hemisphere, once it's touched one time, the next time it reconnects is after it does like it goes to the neckline, and then it retouches super, super high. And it kind of matches like what you're seeing here, like with its DNA. It's not the type that's going to gradually just grind up. It's gonna go. But on the right-hand side, I think as soon as you have one touch on the right-hand side, silver at any moment, and that's a bullish expanding wedge you have there that broke out. I'm not expecting a touch on the right hemisphere anymore. It could happen until
we
could go to the neckline.
The arc's valid, but it will move within the Gann chart. So.
And then retouch maybe that.
And remember, of course, that silver's acting like a commodity, or it very often acts like a commodity. And look at what's happened to things like lumber, energy prices, gas, you know, electricity. You know, same across. I know it's here in the UK. Those things have gone up sort of 700%, 800%, 900%. So yeah, just watch the space.
Okay. No, I agree, and I think we're going to see, you know, we'll hopefully see some big moves. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if silver gets one more hammer and gets knocked down. But if it does, I'm expecting it to be a wick, and mainly because of that Gann chart. I mean, if it did go below here, which I don't think it will, you know, for this to be valid, and look at all the horizontal support and how well it fits, for this to be dragged down now further, you just lose all of that. So it makes logical sense as far as I'm concerned for that to hold as the low now. And that also fits with that 35-year silver chart, 20-year silver chart that I showed you, where you've got the big arcs that was it on the spider symmetry? It was. Spider symmetry. So yeah, I've kind of lost it, but the was it in the spider charts here? But this one here. So there you go. So if you look at this one, the one I started on at the beginning, you know, you've got this big move here, or this point at which silver has got this arcs that are perfectly moving around, and it kind of makes sense for it to touch here. So, but I'll show you something. I mean, I've only got 10 minutes, but I really wanted to sort of touch on this, which I've been working on, which is these Fibonacci spider charts. So this here is SPX, okay? So if you look here and you look, oh, no, don't want to show you the bottom. That kind of gives the game away. But if you look here, if you actually take a date, so I've had this date for a while. I've been drawing similar to that silver one where you've got lines going up to a peak date. And I've had this 6th of June date, which also, you know, is a date that ties in with that, the DXY, you know, and we were saying if it does do that measure move down, when would it be? And it kind of fits in this period around sort of end of May to sort of July time next year. But if you look at this on the SPX, you'll notice here that, you know, it's moved up in this channel. And if you put some Fibonacci fans in here, it moves up in this channel, drops down, straight up in this next channel, drops down, straight up in this next channel, drops down, straight up, drops down, straight up. And it's moving up towards a kind of point here around sort of, you know, 5,600 around June time. Now, a couple of things. One, I kind of wanted to get the retracement levels right. So I just drew down the retracement levels. And the best place that it fitted was, you know, if you put down the 0.25 to the peaks here, you then actually get this perfect kind of like place where at that point you get a touch here at 0.38 with the March lows. You get this here, you know, in September last year where, you know, had this dip with SPX. It went up, it touched the Fibonacci retracement level. It went up, tried again, and then broke through. And what we've been doing since kind of like May time this year is we went up and touched it, again tried to, then it broke through, and we've literally just back tested the 0.75 retracement on the Fibonacci. And so, yeah, you know, where does it go from here? I mean, my view is, you know, you've got two things. It either does a silver and actually reaches its peak, which I think is probably less likely, you know, which is like, you know, 5.5, 5, 6 kind of June time. But look at this arc. Yeah, there's a point here, it can do what Bitcoin did, where does it go up and does it do it, or does it do some symmetry? Does it go down and maybe to that fib and then up again? But you've got this point here where you can start seeing what it's doing. But anyway, the bit that I was on about earlier, kind of the mind-blowing bit, was when I drew all these. I mean, one, it's pretty mind-blowing that it's following these channels kind of perfectly. But secondly, when I drew it back and did these Fibonacci levels, guess where ground zero is? It's literally on Black Monday. On October 1987. So zero line on the Fibonacci, and this wick touches down to that point there. So since October 1987 on Black Monday, there's a complete Fibonacci retracement box and perfect channels playing out in the SPX that goes up to this date here. What it does next, obviously, is up for debate now, but I would argue, you know, you've kind of hit this point now, if I went to days on it, where it's going to do one of two things. You know, it's kind of bounced off the fib level, so I'd say it's up from here. Now, is it going to move down into another channel and go even steeper, or is it going to carry on the blue channel, or is it going to start curving around with this arc around here? Now, this would potentially be good for metals, because if you've actually got a lot of sideways movement where the bulls and the bears are fighting it out, you know, potentially till, you know, for the next year, we just, you know, stuff going up and down, it's going to be risk on, risk off, risk on, risk off. You know, it's potentially good for the metals, I'd say. And interestingly enough, if you do the NDX, it does exactly the same. So there's no difference in it whatsoever. So you've got these same fib channels that go back. So right down to Black Monday, where you got 0 point, it goes up, and here it back tests the first Fibonacci level, goes on here. You've then got these perfect channels moving up, getting steeper and steeper. And again, like with the SPX, it's forming this kind of arc. You know, it's forming this bit here. So, you know, like with Bitcoin, does it not get to the top and move across? Because that's not what this chart's saying. It's not saying it's going to go right up there. It's just saying that this is the center point. You know, this is the center point of potentially where the symmetry would be. Or does it move up to the spider? But it'd be good to get your thoughts. I mean, I've not shared any of this yet, so I was like...
The fact you've got that symmetry there and those dates is quite sends a little bit of a shiver down your spine and makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, doesn't it? It's I
mean, these lines are incredible. I mean, it's literally just follow this line, and these channels are, I mean, they're, you know, even when they go into the channel, it drops down, back test, go along, drops down, back test, goes there, drops down. I mean, NDX doesn't fit quite as well as SPX, but it's still pretty perfect. I mean, look at that. I mean, it was the Black Monday bit that when I went back, and I actually just pulled the line down to meet these two peaks here. And when I did, I thought, oh, wait a minute, it's actually hit a low there. And when I saw the date, I was like, you know, that's just incredible.
Well, of course, the interesting thing is looking at that each time it drops down into a lower channel, it then has to rise even more quickly to continue towards the energy point. If it stayed in the orange channel, it would have just needed to chug along at a slower rate, if you like. But if you're following one, you know, that dark green or that purple channel, boy, you've got to go up almost vertically to get there.
And look what's happened. It's hit the bottom of the blue channel here, and the purple channel, and it's also hit the Fibonacci exactly yesterday. And what's happened today? It's up 1.4%. I mean, I would say that this consolidation in SPX is over until it either hits this red arc, or maybe it drops into the channel here. It might get down a bit more. It might do a double like that. But you know, I mean, what this has given, as far as I'm concerned, is it hasn't given an exact roadmap, but it's given us a tool here, like a huge tool to map out potentially what can happen now. It's pretty crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy, and you know, it's going to be fascinating to see your updates on this, Mike. And you know, I hope everybody sort of watching and listening to this really appreciates that, you know, the hard work that goes into all of this, because, you know, there's a lot of mathematics, geometry, trigonometry, you know, Fibonacci is bringing all these techniques together and, you know, working out these points of significance, these energy points. And, you know, by doing that, we're able to identify, you know, likely target dates and likely target, you know, areas. And it's all part of the roadmap, you know, that helps guide us with our technical analysis. You know, it's fascinating stuff. And, you know, I don't know what Patrick might want to comment on that? I know we're getting towards the end of the towards the interview
briefly
now.
Before that, I was going to show you, because this is silver. I mean, I haven't done the retracement levels yet; they're just kind of there, but it's done something similar following these channels, and you can see. I mean, this is the silver actually follows Gann. The metals and Bitcoin actually follow Gann better than the Fibonacci, but you can see here. Look, it's followed up perfectly there and perfectly there, and it went parabolic. It's the only one that I can find that literally went vertical. So it hit a peak, in May 2011. And then since it's come back down and it's been moving in this channel, then this one, and then you can see here, March 2020, it perfectly touched that one and up here. And now you can see the support in this channel, we've just touched it again. I like it. Patrick, you're like this. I know you're a Star Wars fan, but every time I look at this, it reminds me of flying down the Death Star channel.
I was thinking
target. He's going to take out the spiders.
Just imagine the lasers going down that channel, can't you?
Exactly.
Fighting the channel. No, it's good stuff.
Yeah, and gold does the same. They, you can follow them with the same channels, but I mean the SPX one is just something else, if you ask me. It really is. But
I'd be curious to try the SPX, like in 2001. If we didn't know today existed, if we redid that exercise, but just with the data up to 2001 or 2008, I'm pretty sure we get the same type of roadmap, because you see you have half an arc, like. You could see these arcs in 2001, right?
Yeah.
It's starting, and then it breaks down, and then it goes up. So
exactly. So could this actually be one of those arcs?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I don't want to call something, because I know a lot of people invest a lot of money in these things, and it's not my place to say what people should and shouldn't do. And I could well be wrong, and I think all of us are wrong a lot of the time. But I mean, this arc really. I mean, I don't think it's going to do a silver and hit a parabolic rise into the top. I think that because you've got such a fight between the bulls and the bears at the moment, and you got the Fed involved, and you've got so many things, so many moving parts, that it would just make a lot of sense, I think, for it to trickle along now between 0.75 and the top of the red arc, maybe even to June 23, or like I said, it could drop down to this level here. But if it does, you're going to get a symmetry move, I think, on the other side, and end up with a double top or something.
Yeah. Like the 1960s, there's a whole bunch of examples.
That is a lot there for people to think about and take in, Mike. I know we're just about up with the time here, but yeah, all I can do is thank you for bringing all those techniques to the viewers and the listeners, and thank you for doing all that work for us. It's pretty amazing, mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't spend more time on the metals. I kind of felt like I rushed through them, really. But
I think we need to do a part two. I think we need to have you back and do a part two, so that we can take a bit of a deep dive into those as well.
Talk through the roadmap between sort of now and potentially March or even June, because this June date, I mean, it just keeps coming up with DXY. It's coming up, now with these charts. I do think there's something moving towards that. And that doesn't mean to say, like I said, there's not going to be sudden shocks in between, because it's happened before. Things move between channels, and if you move these channels round, and it's only because the way this is set up, but I mean, you could move them round, and just so your channels are slightly different here, so you then get the parabolic here. So if that happened, for example, the likely thing now is if we're on this channel, we could drop to here, for example, couldn't you? Would be the likely thing if it goes. If SPX was to not be supported by its Fibonacci level and fell, you kind of be getting like 3929 before bounce. But I'm not expecting that. I think we're going to stay above this 0.75 level for a bit now, and certainly test the arc again, or maybe even move a bit higher. But the arc would be my expectation.
All right. Thanks, Mike. We'll do it again very soon, and maybe do some live practice together there, so I could copycat your style.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. And God, if anyone wants to have a go on these SPX and NDX charts, I mean, please do. I mean, I only put these together a couple of days ago, so they're still kind of like fresh in my mind, and I haven't really followed it through completely yet. But I think there's a lot that can be looked at there. So,
all right.
Once again, thank you very much, Mike, and we'll talk to you again for part two coming up, not too distant future, I hope.
Yeah, definitely. No, love to. Anytime. Just let me know.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Ciao,
Kev. Take care. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.